Last week someone mentioned that they had had a busy week. Who of us have not had a busy week? It seems like things just keep getting busier and busier as we go along. And myself, I just keep telling myself, if I can get through this week, next week is going to be a little bit easier because I don't have so many things to do next week. But it seems like when next week comes, it just gets busier and busier. You know, it's Satan has a plan. That plan is to keep us each so busy that we don't have time to work on the things that are important. The important things that we have. The most important thing is our preparation for eternity, for heaven. We need to remember that. We need to not allow Satan to clutter our lives with those things that would detract and take away from our time to prepare for heaven, because that is the most important thing, or should be the most important thing in our lives this morning. I notice that there are quite a few empty spaces in our church family here this morning. And those that knew that I was speaking shouldn't have been afraid to have come, because they know that I'm usually not very long-winded, so that they can come and be here and listen and also share in a Sabbath blessing. This morning, what I'm talking about is effective parenting. And even though there's quite a few children in our group this morning, children, please don't be afraid to listen to some of the things that I say and think about them, because they will affect you in later life. In your bulletins, there was placed a piece of paper. If you would like, you can follow along. It has some blanks that you can fill in. It has the text, or you can just follow along in your Bibles if you like. I'd like to begin with a mother's prayer. And it goes something like this. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray my sanity to keep. For if some peace I do not find, I'm pretty sure I'll lose my mind. I pray I'll find a little quiet, far from the daily family riot. May I lie back and not have to think about what they're stuffing down the sink, or who they're with, or where they're at, and what they're doing to the cat. I pray for time to alter myself. Did something just fall off a shelf? To cuddle in my nice soft bed. Oh no, another goldfish dead. Some silent moments, for goodness sake. Did I just hear a window break? And that I need not cook or clean. Well, I've got the right to dream. Yes, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray my wits about me keep. But as I look around, I know I must have lost them long ago. Children, why do we have them? Think about it. Children require a back-breaking amount of work. They have to be picked up when they cry, carried everywhere, fed and bathed regularly, worried about, listened to when they fuss, taken to every kind of doctor, taught everything that they know, and prayed for without ceasing. They have to be loved unconditionally, trusted to look both ways, held accountable, reinforced, encouraged, disciplined, treated with patience and understanding, and did I mention prayed for without ceasing? And then there's the economics. You start paying for a child as soon as you find out that you're pregnant. And you keep paying for them until, well, you just decide not to pay anymore. There are doctor bills, hospital bills, clothes, furniture, diapers, rattles, bottles, formula, new clothes every 3 months, toys of every kind, shoes and more shoes, lessons that they don't want, membership dues in every club, and did I mention prayed for without ceasing? You have to help them to crawl right, stand right, walk right, move all your possessions out of their way, bribe them, threaten them, tempt them, guard them with your life, Give them your last ounce of energy and prayed for without ceasing. This will surely make prayer warriors of us all. And when they get older, they pretend that you're not that important to them anymore. They want you out of the way. They want to be rid of you. They want more money. They want to be picked up at every friend's house in the county. And of all things, they want your car. The car you worked for, saved for, and cared for. And not only that, they want it clean and full of gas. Why do we have children? Like the grandmother that was sitting in church one day with her granddaughter, and the granddaughter leaned over to grandmother and she says, "Grandma, I don't feel very well. I feel sick. I feel like I'm going to throw up." And Grandma says, "Well, listen, if you just go out the back doors there, and out the other door, and around the corner is the bathrooms. Just go in there." And so the young girl leaves, and within just a moment, she's back. And Grandma looks over to her and she says, "Are you okay?" She says, "Oh yeah, I feel much better now." And Grandma says, "Well, did you make it to the bathroom?" "No, I didn't need to. There was a box beside the door that said, 'For the sick.'" Parenting. It's a tough, demanding job. The problem is, each of us don't have experience at it until our children are grown. I've heard of a man who had 5 theories and no children, and later in life he had 5 children and no theories. Why do we have children? I think the Bible makes it clear when it says, "A man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh." I don't think that it's seen more outwardly, that this is seen more outwardly than when a couple have a child. It's just a mind-boggling event to produce a mini me or a mini you. 2 people come together and produce half with the father's genes and half with the mother's genes. They merge in a uniqueness, a little person. But children can drain a marriage. They can exhaust you mentally and emotionally, and they can allow very little time for each other. Like one woman who said one time, "What a joy and blessing they all are." She had 4 children. But if we didn't have children, life would undoubtedly be much easier, and the quality of our relationship would be different. I believe that our relationship is good for the time that my husband and I are able to spend together, but we both look forward to the time when it will be just the 2 of us again. There's seldom enough energy to supply all the family needs. And when this starts happening, the marriage gets slighted because the needs of the children are so urgent. So the marriage just sort of gets put on hold, and relationships are wounded by neglect from the children taking priority. Children are the most demanding during preschool and adolescence. And studies show that during this time, marriages suffer the most because children require the most energy from birth to kindergarten. And then things will somewhat run smoothly until adolescence, which is from 13 to 18. Parents feel used up, they feel unavailable to each other, and they spend little time together. They start feeling distant, unloved, unimportant, and sense all the romance has vanished from their relationship. We need to be aware of these crucial times. And we also need to seek out solutions to these problems, to be able to find time together. Because if we don't, what will happen is that resentment will eventually set in. The problems will then begin to build on each other, and the husband feels unimportant to the wife, and he spends more time at work or in other places, and the wife begins to feel that his absence is rejection. So she starts investing more time with the children, and it just gets into a vicious circle. Raising children is difficult. And for single parents, I honor you. It's even more doubly difficult. I don't know how you do it. There's twice as much work to be a mom and a dad both. But a mom and a dad both need to play a vital role in a child's life. It's a sacred privilege given to us by God. And I believe that raising great kids can be a wonderful goal that couples can set together. Recognizing together that we are equal partners in the raising of our children. And children need to see that both parents love them and both parents want to be involved in their lives. And sometimes it requires all of our energy. Enjoy the process together and be able to come to a time when you can look at your grown children and say, both the husband and wife can stand back and say, with God's leading, we're very proud of where our children are at. So, let's take a look at some effective steps for parenting this morning. Number one, I believe that your child needs a separate identity. Your child needs to have a separate identity. Psalms 139 tells us this. 139, verses 13 and 14. For thou hast possessed my reins, thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that thy soul knoweth right well. In another version it tells us, you made my whole being, you formed me in my mother's body. I praise you because you made me in an amazing and wonderful way. Every child is different. We as parents are just trustees. We do not own our children. We have children for a short time, and then they leave. They are not a claim of ours. It's all right to give your child your name. It's not all right to expect them to be exactly like you. They are a combination of two people. Two people other than what you are a combination of. They have separate identities, different biochemical systems from anyone else on this earth. They have a unique personality, and they must ultimately determine their own destiny. Our job as parents is to help them to discover their talents, their strengths, their interests, their gifts, and their natural abilities. And that requires at least one thing, and that is listening. Listening to their likes and their dislikes and their interests, their needs, their hurts, and their hopes. And also observing their natural abilities and watching their talents bloom. And helping to identify those talents and nurturing and cultivating them. Our job is to help raise a child to their full potential, not to make them like ourselves. They need their own identity. Number two, your child needs unconditional love. Unconditional love. Romans 15:7 tells us this, accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you, in order to bring praise to God. Who here this morning is a perfect parent? Who among us this morning has not made any mistakes in raising your children? Would you please stand? You know, it's really tough. None of us are perfect parents. And also, none of us were raised by perfect parents. And yet, God accepts us the way we are. God accepts you the way you are. And if God is willing to accept us, we need to be more accepting of our children and not to reject them when they mess up or when they dress differently or when they meet or don't meet our demands and our standards. Children are a gift from God. Are you thankful for that gift? God chose the children that each of you have. And He put that child in your family. He's a gift, and she is a gift. Are you thankful for that gift? Nothing can be more important to the psychological development of a child than knowing that they are loved because of who he or she is and not on any conditional factors. If my child had been taller, if my child had been smarter or funnier, then maybe I could have loved them a little differently. That isn't the way God expects us to love our children. Love cannot be given or taken away because of behavior, performance, intellect, appearance, academic achievement, or anything. Love is given and no questions are asked. Nothing is demanded in return. And a child needs to know that. Parents ought to love their children unconditionally. And one reason parents sometimes have a problem in loving a child this way is because they themselves don't have unconditional love in their own lives and they don't understand it. It is hard to love people this way, and that's why we need God. And understand that God loves us unconditionally. The Bible tells us that God shows His great love for us in this way, that Christ died for us while we were still yet sinners. Did Christ die for us after we became perfect? No, He died for us while we were yet sinners. It was when we were still messing up that Jesus showed us how much He loves us by dying for us. God created each of us. God's love for you is bigger than any sin that you've ever committed or ever will commit. God's love for you is bigger than any mistake that you've ever made. No matter how bad you've blown it in life, God still loves you. We can be angry with God. We can turn away from God. And we can also feel that we don't need God in our lives. But He still loves us. And He will continue to love us. When we begin to understand this type of love for our lives, then we can start giving that love that we have to our children. Children need to have unconditional love. And please remember also that with unconditional love, it's a two-sided coin. And that brings us to number 3. Children need discipline. Did I say that? Yes, our children do need discipline. Sometimes they even want it. They might not tell you that, but they do need discipline, and sometimes they do want it. In Proverbs 13:24 we read, "If we do not punish our children, we don't love them. But if you love your children, you will correct them." So, discipline is a sign of love. Doesn't God discipline us? Does that mean that He hates us? God disciplines us because He loves us, and discipline should be a sign that we love our child. It is saying to a child when we discipline them, "I love you so much that I don't want to let you act the way that you're acting. And I don't want you to do that because later in life it will hurt you." Now there's a difference between discipline and abuse or punishment. Abuse to me is just plain wrong, period. There should never be an excuse for abuse. Not ever. It should never be tolerated. God does not abuse us. Punishment is given to inflict penalty for wrong in the past. Well, Jesus has taken care of that penalty. God doesn't punish us, but He does discipline us. He disciplines those He loves. You see, abuse is unfair and unexpected, where discipline is fair and expected. Abuse is also degrading and demoralizing, where discipline upholds dignity. Abuse is extreme. It's too harsh, and abuse is brutal. Discipline, on the other hand, is balanced and it's within limits. Abuse is torturous and it leaves scars. Discipline may be painful, but it leaves no scars. Abuse results from hatred and resentment, where discipline is prompted by love and concern. Abuse also creates hatred and resentment and terror and emotional damage and resentment of authority, whereas discipline leads to a healthy respect for that authority. Abuse destroys self-esteem. It leads to horrifying permanent damage and an inability later in life to maintain responsibility, where discipline strengthens self-esteem. It leads individuals later in life to discipline themselves. Psalms 22:6. Train our children how to live right, and when they're old, they will not change. Discipline is vital to the formation of a child. It helps them to live right. Now, how a child is disciplined depends upon the child. If you have two in the family, it's much different for each of them. It's like my son and my daughter. My daughter, all I had to do was sometimes just a look, and she was instantly in tears, not wanting to do what had caused that. Whereas my son was a little stronger self-willed. And that didn't work. There had to be oftentimes more drastic measures taken. There needs to be guidelines with our discipline, but there also needs to be consistency. Children will become confused when they are disciplined for something one time and the next time they're not. And they say to themselves, well, I wasn't disciplined, so should I or shouldn't I? And really, in essence, we're making them wonder, am I really loved? There needs to be consistency. And also, when we discipline, we shouldn't make threats. I was at the store just recently, and there was a lady that was pushing a cart, and in this cart was just a little fella. And it's one of these children that you wish you could just have 5 minutes with. This child was screaming and yelling. And he was pulling things off the shelf, and he was putting them in the cart. He was throwing them on the floor. And here's the mother. She says, I want you to sit down, son. I told you to sit down. Sit down. Now I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2, 3. I told you to sit down. And it just kept going on and on and on. He just kept pulling things off the shelf and screaming and hollering. And I thought to myself, lady, you really deserve it. We shouldn't make threats. If we're going to count to 3, there had better be a little bit of follow-through. There had better be consequences when you get to 3, or our children will learn to keep going. They'll keep on doing what they're doing. And we need to also make it realistic. We had some friends one time that had a young boy that was 10 years old that was very active. Always seemed to be getting into trouble. And we was over visiting one day, and he was doing something that his father didn't like. And his father says, if you don't straighten up, I'm going to lock you in your room till you're 18, and all you're going to get to eat is bread and water. We need to make things realistic. The young boy thought to himself, yeah, right. My dad's going to lock me in my room for 8 years, and all I'm going to get is bread and water. Yeah, right. Discipline needs to be realistic. It needs to be effective. It needs to be consistent. Children desire and want to have limits. And I don't care how old your child is, they want those limits because within those limits there is a sense of security. If those limits are narrow and unrealistic, you will get a child that is frustrated and resentful, and it results in an angry and hostile child. But on the other hand, if they're too broad, you end up with a child that has excessive permissiveness. I've actually discovered that we can sit down as parents with our children and discuss things, and they sometimes will help set those limits. I can remember one time when our son was just learning to drive. Rose and I sat down and we thought, well, we need to have a curfew. He's driving now, so we need to set a time when he should be home. And we discussed amongst ourselves when we thought that he should be home. And we thought that 10 o'clock was late enough, that we needed to have him home by then. We also needed to know where he was at and where they were going and what they were going to be doing and all those things that parents worry about. And so we called our son in one time. We says, you're driving now, and we need to have a talk about when you should be home. What time do you think your curfew should be? And we asked him, what should be a good curfew for you? And he says, well, he says, Mom and Dad, he says, I'm still in school, and I need to study, so how about 9:30? Works for us. More often than not, our children will help set those guidelines that are sometimes even more stringent than what we set. There will come a time, however, when we as parents may even break our own rules. We're either just too tired and we don't want to deal with it. But please don't beat yourselves up. We can't demand perfection. Don't bring up a past forgiven wrong. Remember that your family is a team and you need to pull together. You need to be able to flex. You need to be able to give and to take. We need to allow our children a cushion of freedom. But there will be failures. Count on it. We need to take those failures. We need to learn from them. We need to readjust and realign. Discipline is there it's there to help them learn. It's not there to help beat them down. Number 4, your child needs to know that his parents love each other. They need to know that their mom and dad are in love, not only with them, but with their spouse. Colossians 3:19, and you husbands must be loving and kind to your wives, and not bitter against them nor harsh. And the same goes for the wives toward the husbands. What we model to our children in the home is what they grow up and expect from their mates. Do they see that you love and respect one another? Do they see that love expressed to one another in the hugs and kisses that you share? The touching that goes on in your home? In your words, in your voices? The looks that you give, the body language that you express? How we work together? All of these things. Or do they witness put-downs, sarcasm, disrespect? How we treat each other is a model of how they will treat their future spouses and families. What kind of picture do we portray? The Review and Herald tells us this: the best way to educate children to respect their father and mother is to give them the opportunity of seeing the father offering kindly attentions to the mother, and the mother rendering respect and reverence to the father. It is by beholding love in their parents that children are led to obey the 5th commandment and to heed the injunction, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor thy father and thy mother, which is the 1st commandment with promise, that it may be well with thee and that thou mayest live long on the earth. What are we as parents doing together? And what we do as parents together, be it our study time, what, how, and why we worship and whom we worship, all these things have an impact and make an impression upon our children of how they need to act. What about the fun time that we spend together? Or do we? Do we play with our children? If we don't share this time with our children, why don't we? How then will our children know how to interact with other children and their children when they have them? Recently, I read about 2 areas that I think impact our families and our children. And one of them has to do with divorce rate in America today. This rate has exploded in recent years from 1 in 20, 50 years ago, to last year, 1 in 5. 1 in 5 families experience divorce. Children learn by example, by studying role models. Are we role models? And if we are, what kind of role models are we? And the second one, and this has to do with the state of Oregon alone, it's a fact that I heard just 2 days ago, has to do with our young people, age group 7th grade to the 12th grade. And it's a sad fact. But it's a suicide rate amongst our young people. And not just our in the Adventist church, but it's the young people in school. The stats are that in this age bracket, that if you were to go into a classroom of 30 students in this age bracket, at least 5 out of the 30 have either thought about or have thought about suicide. We as parents need to be totally aware of our children's lives. Like I said in the beginning, it's a back-breaking job, but it's a glorious job. It's a wonderful thing. Have you ever wondered or was told or seen small children role-playing? Have you ever watched children do that? The little girl wanting to be the mommy and the little dad wanting to be the dad. Have you ever listened to how they interact with each other? That's a direct picture of how we as parents are. We need to be the role models that God would have us to be. And if you remember one thing from today, and I hope that it is that your children are special. They're awesomely special to us. They're such a special gift from God. Just 4 little short things that I'd like to add. Some things that I have learned. And actually my sister-in-law emailed me this just 2 weeks ago, I believe it was. And she had a whole list of them. And these are 4 things that are particularly involved in my life. The first one is, I've learned that when you're in love, it shows. I've also learned that the simple walks that I took with my parents on summer nights when I was a child did wonders for me as an adult. I've also learned that there is nothing sweeter than sleeping with your babies and feeling their breath on your cheek. And one that I am going to be learning in the near future is this. I've learned that when your newly born grandchild holds your little finger in their little fist, that you're hooked for life. Our children are special to us. We need to treat them as such. Please remember that today.